More than 30 big, fully voiced, fully fledged, long Otome games are on the Switch. There are these days so many English Otome games on the Switch, it's getting confusing. So I'll try to bring order in the chaos of Otome games we are blessed with these days, to make it easier for you to find your next Otome game or find similar Otome games to your current favorites. That's why I've sorted the Otome games by mood or setting. It was difficult, but I tried. And I'll only speak briefly about each of them because there are so many. Let's go. Starting with comedies, and already one of my favorite Otome games, which is Cupid Parasite. In Cupid Parasite, the real goddess Cupid tries to prove to her father Mars that humans can also fall in love without the god's help, and thus descends to Earth as a bridal advisor working at the Cupid Corporation, where she matchmakes couples. But for her next promotion, she has to matchmake the Parasite 5. 5 totally unmarriable bachelors. One can't forget his old love. One only cares about looks. One only cares about status and work so much that he doesn't even attend in person but sends his assistant. One can't shut up about Greek mythology. And the last one is only interested in girls who are already in a relationship. What sounds like the most awful bunch of guys turns out to be one of the best Otome games I've played to this day. It's extremely funny and sweet, steamy, and also has its tragic and sad or darker moments. This game has anything you would ever want from an Otome game. And the best thing about it, the recently released fan disc, which means, you know, the part 2, which is even steamier and funnier and gorgeous, will also be localized in 2024. What a year. Also quite an okayish comedy is Variable Barricade, where you again have to date trash man. When I was playing it, it was like, why am I again the victim of these trash men? Because in Search for a Groom, our rich heroine has to live together with those 4 bachelors. And they're not less weird than the bachelors of Cupid Parasite. One is a gambling addict, one committed marriage fraud, one just lives off the money of other girls, and the last is knee-deep in debt. So yeah, probably also not charmed at first sight, but luckily those boys are also not as bad as they seem at first glance. I think this game shines in the character roots and the funny interactions, but to me the romance roots were lacking. There were 2 characters I enjoyed, one for the romance, one for just the hilarious moments and gorgeous voice acting. But the others I couldn't really get into, and to me they took the humor a bit too far. I feel like the humor in this game could be considered hurtful to the feelings of others. So while the interactions are funny, I think in the romance route they overdid the silly funny moments, and it wasn't my kind of humor. Not a bad game, it's okay. So if you want another comedy with trash bandos, I think you might have fun with this game. And the last game in the comedy section is Lover Pretend, which I also call Liar Pretend. Because for various circumstances, you have to pretend that you're in a relationship with each of the respective allies, but the pretend time with real life answers isn't always about acting lovey-dovey in love, but it can also be about lying to people, which also takes away the comedic aspect for me. I think lying is not funny, or maybe that's just me. And while you're in a fake relationship with these characters, you're also trying to find your real father in a movie shooting setting. While the game is lighthearted and I enjoyed the flirty boys route, it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me because everything was so light and superficial, and I didn't feel like I could really connect to the characters on a deeper level. But again, a game that shines with its character interactions, and if you're looking for shoujo manga vibes and a very lighthearted and simple romance, then Lover Pretend could be a good choice for you. And recently we also got Hamafura, or My Next Life as a Villainess or Roots Lead to Doom, which practically takes place after the first season of the anime. The comedic aspect in this game is mainly when Katarina is eating off the ground and looking for food again, or when all the guys and girls fight over her and her attention. And if you haven't picked that up yet, or are interested in the sweet goodies of an Idea Factory limited editions,
then just comment in the comment section which game you want to play next or which game was your favorite of 2023 to participate in the giveaway of the limited edition that Idea Factory sent so graciously to me. And in 2 weeks, I will randomly draw a winner. So good luck and have a good laugh with Hermaphrodite.
On to dramas. My favorite drama, or how I like to call it, Disney Otome game is Radiant Tale. In Radiant Tale, you join a fantasy circus with, again, a very weird bunch of characters who are not suited to be in a circus, but for some reason, you travel around the country with them in the endeavor to make people laugh and the flowers of happiness in their hearts bloom to melt the prince's heart. Very soft fantasy setting where the prince stopped aging due to his frozen heart, but with a magical flower you have to make bloom with laughter and joy, you might be able to melt his frozen heart. In the common route, you travel around the various cities and make people laugh and also scratch the surface of every ally's backstory or trauma, because they're all connected to their respective cities and have a history and a backstory there. And then in the character routes, you help them overcome their past. And I would say, so while the common route is very touching and I cried a lot, the character routes are more angsty about the trauma of their allies and helping them to overcome it. Thus I feel as the trauma of their allies or their backstory is more the focus of the route, it's not so much the romance. The only romance I really felt was Eon's route, because look at him, he hot, so he had a lot of yearning scenes and everything, but I'll stop talking about it. That's not the topic of the video, that's the topic of another video. So if you want fantasy and a bit of angst and a game about the power of emotions, Radiant Tale would be my recommendation. I haven't played Jan because I heard it's more a friendship game than a dating game. Because the story is that you cross-dress as a boy to go to the all-boys theatre school because you're a very talented dancer, I think. What's very cool about the game that you have rhythm game elements, and it might have a broader audience due to the romance not being the main focus of the game, but more the friendship development and the emotional impact the heroine has on the whole school and each character. This game is highly acclaimed by everyone who played it. I don't know a single person who dislikes the game. I just know that no one recommended it to me, Steamy Girl, because it's not steamy, and so you have to tell me how much you like it. A game that was one of the first localizations is Café Enchanté. And this game surprised a lot of people back then because it has a rather light-hearted common route where you take over the cafe of your grandfather, where supernatural creatures come as guests. Being an angel who is addicted to Otome games, a knight without a head, an angry fire beast, and a demon lord. And they are all watched over by the last character, an employee at the company that is responsible for watching over the creatures in the world. And so every character has their dark secrets and their really tough problems in their respective worlds. And those are bit by bit introduced in the common route, but you will dive very deep into them in the character routes. And so again, it is a route about the problems of the allies, and thus not very romance heavy. I've only played the route of the angel for now, and felt like it was more like a friendship development, because the heroine supported the character emotionally, but it didn't get the reason why they are in love and not just friends. Which means this game is really plot and very lore heavy, and there are long segments of a route where they explain the world and how it's built and the characters and what happened 100 years in the past. So if you like a more plot heavy game to explore the world building of various fantasy worlds, which is considerably interesting, then I would recommend Café Enchanté to you. The last on the drama list, but the only one without a fantasy setting, is Sympathy Kiss, by the same team who did Lover Pretend. And you could say this is Lover Pretend, but in more K-drama and more steamy. And I wouldn't classify it as a comedy like Lover Pretend. In Sympathy Kiss you get assigned to work on a mobile phone app, but this plot is it's just the reason to get the plot going, so no one cares about that. It's more about getting to know the co-worker you choose to work with and helping them overcome their trauma. Yay, feels familiar. That can usually be a nice way to tell a love story. that the heroine supports the LI, maybe changes his view on the world, the view on himself, to make him overcome his past. And I guess that's what they kind of did in this game, but it was very shallow. For example, one trauma of a character was 10 years ago, someone said something mean to me, and I wasn't able to trust people ever since. That's admittedly sad. But it's not a trauma. It's like you're a really touchy and sensitive person. It seems unhealthy. But it's not an emotional drama trauma I can relate to. That was my main gripe with Sympathy Kiss, and then it was heavily advertised as a super steamy game, which is admittedly the reason I bought it, yeah, I know. But we don't judge here. The steamy part also lacked, in my opinion, because the character routes are quite short, and then the steamy scenes are just, attached at the end, but without any reason or connection to the story. It's just, yeah, here, get your steamy scene, okay, bye. That was the feeling I got from the steamy scene, and not as a part of a organic romantic relationship, if that makes sense. I wasn't that much annoyed by the eyesless, voiceless, wordless heroine, because she doesn't have dialogue, but it's rather conveyed what kind of things she says, but not the exact wording. If that why you might shy away from the game, I'd say no, she has a character rather warn you of the shallow drama and the kind of forced seeming steam. For you, so Sympathy Kiss is for you if you want beautiful art and lighter drama. Then some more crime-focused Otome game. And I guess the one you have probably already played yourself is Color X Malice. And with that, you have played a game I haven't played yet. I tried, but it was too dark for me, because the setting is we're kind of, I think now or likely in the future, because in the present days in Tokyo there are terrorist attacks, and because of that the government orders a lockdown because random people on the street or police officers get killed in very horrible ways. And the game doesn't shy away from describing and showing these horrible ways. If I remember correctly, the terrorists kind of want a new world order, and they think it's just to kill those people in those horrible ways. And you play as a police officer who investigates the different cases together with each LI. So with each LI, you investigate a different crime case. If you're a fan of crimes and brutality, that's good. So for me, it was too dark and too brutal and too real. But I've heard this plot-driven game is very interesting and also has a high romance value. If you can bear the more brutal and gory descriptions, then I'm sure everyone will tell you, play the game. You see, I'm not very big on crime stories. That's also why I didn't play Busterfellas yet. Busterfellas also has a fantasy aspect, as the heroine can go back in time, but then ends up in another person's body. She gets entangled in this group of half criminals when she sees one of them being shot and is trying to save him. And thus she joins hand with this weird bunch of criminals. Another game that is more crime story and plot focused, and that also has light romance aspects and the end. But I've heard that the characters are very surprising, and most people who played it also are a big fan of the characters and the plot. So maybe that could be your next game after Color X Malice, or the other way around. And there even are hints for the localization of Busterfellas 2, but there's no official announcement yet. Before playing Amnesia, I totally underestimated the crime aspect. Because in Amnesia, the heroine lost her memories, and the question is, why? And especially Shin's route focuses a lot on this crime. And in Thomas' route, even more crimes are committed. The other characters, Kent and Ikki, were a bit more lighthearted in my perspective, but overall the romance is rather light, and the heroine is almost non-existent. She doesn't speak, she doesn't have her own thoughts. For me, it was really difficult to get into the mood. But if you're a person who likes to self-insert and project yourself into the game, then that's of course a perfect experience. Next onto the dark games. And my favorite dark game is definitely Pure Fjorde and the sequel 1926. In Pure Fjorde, you somehow end up amidst a brutal mafia fight. I don't know why they're interested in you, but they are, and in the different routes you join different mafia families. If you like being a damsel in distress, like abduction plots, or like feeling a severe power imbalance between the man and the woman, then I think you'll have a lot of fun with Pure Fjorde. But as it's a mafia setting, Neither the plot nor the guys are really good, but as it's a mafia setting, the plot can of course get brutal and dark, as well as the dateable characters. They are mafia guys. They are not good guys. So if you expect a super wholesome and sweet relationship, I don't think they can give that to you. But if you want an adventurous and dangerous relationship, then you'll be more than happy with the guys in Pure Fjorde. Another surprisingly dark game is Paradigm Paradox. I haven't personally played this game due to the awful reviews. I know like 1 or 2 people who were able to enjoy this game, but most of the reviews or personal comments were like, the story is all over the place, the romance is rather lacking, very short and very sudden. In Paradigm Paradox, you live in a dystopian world and fight against monsters together with gender-swapped magical girls who are actually boys. This setting sounds really fun, but it will turn out to be rather dark. But as there are 9 characters, the individual routes are really short, and I think that's the reason why they don't really manage to tell a gripping and deep story, but the plot and the lore will end up kind of confusing, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And what I think is probably the worst thing about it, that there isn't enough time to develop a decent love relationship with each character. If you just want a quick and short like fantasy episode or short action-packed story, then you might be interested in Paradigm Paradox. Even darker, and that's in the You'll Be Practically Dead section, is Even If Tempest. Even If Tempest is one of the darkest, shattering and hopeless stories I've read. Probably not as dark as Wish, but I think it comes close, because after the heroine gets killed as an alleged witch, she gains the power of Fatal Rewind, which means whenever she dies, she is able to go back in time. And that she does a lot. In each route with each character, the heroine has to die to start again. So that's why I call it the meta Otome, because when you want to go to the next route, you don't go back and save files. Heroine literally dies and starts again. On top of that, comes some interesting gameplay for the gameplay fans among you, where you have to investigate the different characters during the trial season and then vote on who committed the crime in the last night. So kind of a werewolf Danganronpa mashup. The characters are extremely well written, the overall story is well written, but it has a heavy plot and this trial gameplay focus. Even though the routes are short, I wouldn't say that the romance is lacking, it's just that there's not a lot of time because of the shortness of the routes for romance, but there is romance. The characters are sweet and you really understand why they fall in love with each other, which makes the whole plot even more tragic. But luckily there is a fan disc that also has a bit of drama, but also gives us more sweet time with the characters. Another fatal game is Hana Awase, which is split into 4 games. And in Hana Awase you go to a magical school where you have to win magical card battles that are somehow connected to reality. I didn't get far into the game because the art style doesn't speak to me and I'm not a fan of gameplay in general. But what I got is that there's a weird hierarchy between the students, and several students have to give magical energy to another student in various interesting forms. Everything about this game is twisted, not only the very difficult to grasp lore and world building, but also the characters. What I've heard is they are not really good people. They are twisted. They might arrest the heroine or even worse. And there's a lot of tragedy in this game. I think there could be books written with trigger warnings for this game. So if you like dark, twisted, brutal, madly sad plots. A girl in the Discord compared the Hana Awase game to Orlok's bad ending in Pure Fjorde. If you like that kind of madness, then you'll probably be able to enjoy Hana Awase quite a lot. But the most hopeless games of all is of course Wish. Wish is placed in a sci-fi fantasy setting on an island where everyone dies at the age of 23. And the heroine is called the Goddess of Death because often people around her suddenly die in very brutal ways. Until some day she is visited by a mysterious man who introduces himself as the Grim Reaper. And he asks her to help him catch a serial killer because he's suddenly overworked because of all the killings going on. And in return, he will help her get rid of her death curse. Well, the common route is still rather cute, because together with all the LIs you hunt for the serial killer. But already the serial killer topic is rather heavy, and killing people on the street is rather brutal. There's a lot of blood splashing on the screen and everything, but the character routes get even more dark and hopeless. This game, for some characters, doesn't have a happy ending. For some characters, it will be eternal despair. If you like that, if you like people dying, being desperate and hopeless for the rest of their lives, with no hope to come ever, no salvation in sight, then have fun with Shu and Nubish. Next, some general fantasy settings. I just wasn't sure which mood they would fit best, so I summed them up in the general fantasy section. First one you probably already know is Olympia Soirée. In Olympia Soirée, we live in a world with a color hierarchy. Yes, PC people, breathe. It's gonna be alright. We live in a color hierarchy for the moment. We know it's not good, okay? Okay. Where our white, I know, Olympia has to marry before the white color dies out. But she can choose between all the various colors. So she could marry red serious man, blue angry man, the purple flirty man, the green friendly man, the grey shy man, or the black funny man. The men in this game are great. They are the shining sun in this world. But the world building is extremely dark. And the game is also famous for its twisted bad endings. They are good. Because they are steamy, like the whole game. That's the other thing the game is famous for its steaminess. But it's not like sympathy kiss, like steaminess for the sake of steaminess, but good steaminess. Steaminess as a part of a relationship development, which is organic and just filled with love and nothing more. So for a mature yet wholesome romance, I really recommend Olympia Soirée in this mystical fantasy setting. By the same team, next year will Tengoku Struggle be localized. As it's by the same team as Olympia Soirée, you get the same steaminess as an organic love development. But this time we're not set in like a heavenly color world, but kind of in hell and the real world. Because prisoners from hell escaped, and our heroine, who is a guard of the prisons in hell, has to catch them together with other more loyal prisoners. But in order for those prisoners to really unleash all their powers, they have to get closer with the heroine. And so the game finds a really good excuse for them to spend time together very closely. And the heroine has to do things in order to unleash their powers that are inherently steamy. And that means it's inherently a lot of fun. On top of that, the writing is great, the pacing is great. Like in all my favorite games, there's either something romantic or plot relevant happening, but it's a good mixture of both. You can't say it's plot or character driven, it's a perfect combination of both. But this game is steamy, is funny, is tragic, it will make you laugh and cry, and that is for me what makes a good Otome game. Stirring up all the emotions, giving you all the steam and all the love you would ever want to. So especially if you like games like Olympia Soirée, Tengoku Struggle is a must-buy. A bit lesser known, and also I didn't play it yet, is Dairoko Ayakashi Mori, where you are in kind of an Ayakashi police controlling the different districts where different Ayakashi live. This game is more on the light-hearted side, both when it comes to plot as well as romance. Taisho Alice, on the other hand, where the main game and the FD are now available in English on the Switch as well as PC. Taisho Alice is in a rather twisted fantasy setting, where you can date characters like Gretel, Cinderella, Snow White. They are connected to the original fairy tale but tell a completely twisted, dark story. They look cute and like boys, but I don't think they are actually cute. I only could get through one route, and for me there was too much plot and too few romance. That's a criticism you'll hear a lot with me. But if you're interested in this fairy tale setting and interested in darker characters that might then not give you as many steamy moments as Olympia Soirée, for example, then I think Taisho Alice will be able to surprise you with its twisted storytelling. Sci-fi games where I also wasn't sure about the mood, because they have a bit of everything. The first is Code Realize, also one of the early localizations, where a girl with poisonous skin gets captured by a gentleman thief Lupin together with his weird crew. So the main goal of the plot is to find out about Cardia's poisonous skin and to heal it so they can kiss. But that might not happen in every route, because after a very funny and entertaining common route about, doing heists and thief stuff, the character routes get very dark and very angsty and explore the trauma and backstory of the allies. And sometimes that might lead to also Cardia's salvation, but not always. I wasn't really a fan of it personally. To me, the romance development heavily relies on the suspension bridge effect, that because you're an adventure, you do something dangerous together, you fall in love. But if you like Wish, so like heavy sci-fi plots, what for me is like random sci-fi things happening, if you like that, if you like a plot-heavy game, if you like visual novels like Steins Gate, so if you don't need heavy romance, but just want to enjoy a well-written story with well-written characters in a well-written sci-fi plot where a lot of sci-fi things happen, then Code Realizer will be really enjoyable for you. My personal sci-fi favorite is Norn 9 and its FD. In Norn 9, you can play as 3 heroines who each have 3 allies to romance, who are on a mission by the World Organization, but don't really know what mission. They all have Esper abilities, like psychic abilities, like reading the mind, seeing the future. So the main time is spent on this ship, just building up character relationships with a really likable cast. The heroines are so immensely well written and voiced, and all the dateable characters are also extremely interesting and likable. The romance development with all the characters was really touching to me. Even though the routes are short, they spend so much time deepening their relationship, and it makes so much sense to me where every character is in love with the heroines. And at the end of the routes, you get the sci-fi revelation about what this whole mission is about. And even though I usually don't like plots, I like those revelations because it posed philosophic questions, and that's my thing. If you don't like questions about morality, right or wrong though, I think those latter parts might bore you. But especially as there are so many characters, I don't think you can go wrong with Norn 9, because you'll certainly find a guy who is for you and whose love development will speak to your heart. Lastly, the historical section. Sadly, no Hakuoki on the Switch in English yet, but instead we get Kimiyuki or Winter's Wish. This is set in the Edo era, where the heroine was exiled because she can see strings around people's necks indicating their emotions. And when they have negative emotions, or destructive emotions, then monsters appear. And then people started thinking it must be her fault, because that's what judgy-wudgy villagers tend to think. So she was exiled, but now starts working at a secret society hunting down those monsters. The problem with her sexy co-workers in that society is that they are not humans, but instruments without emotions. And like I said in my angry review about the game, dating characters without emotions, without the ability to feel love, isn't like the super smartest setup for an Otome game, which is about dating and love. That's one of the many reasons, 13 in total, check out my review, why I can't quite recommend this game to everyone. Yeah, maybe if you like fantasy plots that don't make sense, because the writers didn't care enough to make them consistent. If you like that, and if you like dating people without emotions, then Kimiyuki is very much for you. Another historical game I'm not quite convinced of is Crimson Flower. This is the port of an originally R18 PC game, which was cut, not censored, it was cut. Seriously, it was just cut for the Switch and PS Vita release. The good thing I can say about the game, I think it's a multilingual release in English on the Switch, so you can change between Japanese and English, which is always good. But that's about it. The abusive setup of this game is that women are rare and thus apparently lost their rights and often get abducted and raped by men who want them to bear children. Yeah, and then we are falling in love with our conquerors, and that's pretty much it. So the good thing is that the heroine doesn't very much care about non-consensual interactions, so they are not technically non-consensual because she's somehow okay with that. That's good for her, but makes me very much uncomfortable. And especially with the Switch release being cut, I don't think the game makes a lot of sense. Like often it was like, oh, they're talking about last night. I didn't know there was last night, because they could just completely cut that part instead of changing it, that it makes sense for a censored version. I only recommend this game if you like truly abusive setups. Another originally R18 game I like way more is Chou no Doku Hana no Kosari, which is set in my favorite era, the Taisho era. And our sweet yet self-confident heroine can date the multiple men who are falling in love with her. This game is controversial because you can date brother, and all of the relationships could kind of be taboo relationships, like not in my perspective, but it could be controversial. Some endings are also very, very dark. The overall topic ends up really dark, though it starts in this slice of life setting. But for me, it was totally on the bearable side, and the steamy scenes were censored. Great. They just don't show much nudity, but still you get a lot of steamy scenes with kissing, passion and everything. If you're looking for a steamy game, a mature game, a darker game, I think Butterfly Poison checks all your boxes. I think my favorite historical game, though, might be Bidoshana, where you play as a cross-dressing... I don't know history. Yeah, so you cross-dress and you have to fight, okay? Cool. You can fall in love with the guys from your own clan or with the guys from your enemy clan, which is kind of hot because they're enemies and kind of evil. The game is also very plot heavy because you have the fighting plot and some war going on, I don't know. I really don't care for that. But the romance development is also quite sweet, and you get a lot of tense moments with the characters before and after finding out the real gender of the heroine. So if you like historical plots, if you like fighting plots, or if you like a gender bender story, I can recommend Bidoshana to you. Recently, there also came 2 voiced indie games to the Switch. Dormitory Love is a cute little game about your dorm life with various exchange students. If you want something short and simple, which is more about cultural exchange than actual passionate love, then this slightly wonky indie port might be interesting if it's on sale. Another indie port is Yuka from the Abyss. Riding home to Hokkaido after leaving her boring job in Tokyo, the protagonist misses her train stop and finds herself at a strange station where she gets told by a god that she is dead. And in the world of the gods, she has to stand through fierce trials and taste forbidden love with gods. Other new announcement for 2024 are 3 new Voltage games that will have simultaneous Japanese and English releases. I talked about them in my announcement video because I think it's getting kind of long, but they are Neon Mafia, where you play as a mafia boss in a dystopian setting, Kaleido Tower, which is a fantasy setting about the greed of humans, and for 2025, Vampire Hunter, where you're a vampire hunter and have to decide between the sides, the human or the vampire side. There also are some new Voltage ports from mobile games, being Masquerade Kiss and Finally in Love Again. What's great about the Voltage games is that they have multilingual releases in Japanese and English, but I have a whole own video about those games, where you get Steam Prison, Nightshade, a fantasy historical setting of being a ninja with magical powers, Ephemeral Fantasy on Dark in a magical school setting with our favorite tropes like yandere, tsundere and shota, and so on. So this video is getting so long and there are so many small and rather unknown games. I highly recommend you to watch that video. The last category are fan-translated English games. Those are Diabolic Lovers, where you are bullied and tormented by hot vampires, and Le Fleur, where you are a queen and have to change the fate of the country or choose love. This game has beautiful art but is a bit infamous for its 100 of bad endings. Then Brothers Conflict, you all might know the anime of, where you can date 13 different stepbrothers, and Hakuoki Sweet School Life, which is a Hakuoki spin-off where you go to school with your historical characters. The other fan translations not on the Switch are Kuni no Alice, Black Wolf Saga, a really twisted, dark fantasy game, Ayakashi Gohan, a like family-friendly, warm fantasy game, and Vampire Nights. I probably don't have to explain, it's the Otome game to the famous anime, and it's not even that bad. Was that all? No. There are still some smaller unknown titles I really recommend you to watch in my last sum up video in the last section, and the multilingual release titles. So tell me, which ones have you played? Which ones are you most interested in? Was this helpful? And thanks so much for my patrons for supporting me as always, and I hope I see you in one of the other 2 videos. Bye!